Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Annie and Kate. Hi, Annie.
Hey, Kate.
And welcome to Jane Gilmore, our lovely guest tonight.
Hey, Kate. Hey, Annie. Lovely to be here.
And over to Annie to do the introductions.
So welcome, Jane. It's a great pleasure to meet you. So Jane was the founding editor of the King's Tribune. She has a Masters of Journalism from the University of Melbourne and is now a freelance journalist and author with a particular interest in feminism, media and data journalism. And now I understand why Kate invited you onto the podcast reading that. She's the creator of the FixedIt campaign, which highlights victim blaming and the erasure of male violence from news headlines. Her book, FixedIt, Violence and the Representation of Women in the Media, was published by Penguin Random House in August of 2019. And I cannot imagine a more worthy topic for us to probably delve into at some point on the podcast as well. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you, Annie. Great to be here, as I said.
Yes.
I have been wanting to get you on for the longest possible time, so it's really good to have you here. So what we're going to do is we're each going to ask you a question. Annie, you can start.
All right, I'm going to start off with one that I love asking, which is, if you could go back and meet your younger self, whether it's at university or college days, or maybe even younger, and you could give yourself one piece of advice, what would you go back and tell your younger self?
That I am so much better at everything than I ever believed. Because there's always that thing, like every time you reach a big birthday, like one with a 0 in it, and you look back 10 years and think, wow, if only I knew 10 years ago how good I looked, how great I was, how much I was getting done, all that stuff. Where at the time, all I remember thinking was, got to have a top to cover my bum, and I'm not working hard enough, and I'm not getting enough done, and I should be doing more. And God, I'm being so lazy because I'm sitting down reading a novel. Just to be able to go back and say, relax, you're doing fine and you're going to keep doing fine. If I would have believed myself, I think it would have made life a whole lot easier, but I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have believed myself if I'd heard it.
It's funny, isn't it? I still have those little foibles as well. And even right now when I go to the gym,
yep,
I always wear a t-shirt that covers, my stomach and my bottom. And again, similar to what you just said, if I'd have known 20 years ago that I looked amazing back then. I don't think I look too bad now either, but either way, it's sort of, gosh, the amount of nonsense we carry around in our brains.
And it's such a waste of energy and time and effort. And I think all that, if I put all that mental space into something other than just feeling terrible about myself, I could have actually been maybe almost getting enough done so that I didn't have to feel like I was lazy and unproductive.
I think that's something that almost every one of our guests has said in one way or another, that we as women always look at ourselves as less than. And it's a really common theme. So I'm going to ask one of my favourite questions, which is what do you do for self-care? Do you practice self-care? And if you do, what do you do?
I'm erratic with it. There are some times when what I'm thinking of as self-care is actually self-harm. So under extreme pressure, maybe a few too many drinks, maybe a few too many chocolate biscuits, maybe too much withdrawing from the world, because at the time that feels like self-care, and what it really is just exhaustion and overwhelm. When I'm doing actual self-care, it's a lot more, vegetables and going to the gym and spending time with people that remind me that the world is there and I'm connected to it and I'm part of it. So it often depends on how clearly I'm able to think. And the thing with what we call self-care, which is not having a bath and a chocolate cake, it's understanding that you need to be able to look after yourself to be able to look after all the other things. And possibly the best thing you can do to look after yourself sometimes is just say no. No, I can't take on that project. No, I'm not going to wash those dishes. No, I'm not going to spend time with that person that makes me feel like shit. No, I'm not going to take on more work that's just destructive. I'm just going to stop and breathe and be, and that's enough. It's one of those things where it's the do what I say, not what I do. I know that's the best way to do it, but sometimes it's just, oh, Christ, let's open a bottle of wine and see what happens.
There's a friend of mine back in England, And he uses the phrase, the power of your yes is defined by what you say no to. And that's another way that I try to look at it, which is if you really want to do something and you really want to go all in and do it brilliantly, if you've said yes to 27 other things at the same time, your ability to be able to deliver on the thing that you really want to do is so diminished and so diluted. And I think we're all guilty of doing that. And I think when you do dilute yourself that much, spread yourself really thinly, it can only lead to feeling disappointed and unfulfilled, and also probably a little bit kind of, I really should know better. And I'm 44 now, and I still have those moments where I'm like, yeah, I really should know better.
Yeah, I don't know whether you ever get over that, but one of the things I'm really trying to do now is exactly what you just said, of pick one thing and do it really well, instead of pick 20 things and do all of them in a week. And then, I can tick off all those boxes. Yeah, I got all that done, but look back on it and think, well, no, I didn't do them very well. And now I'm embarrassed and upset and flagellating myself and resenting all the guilt and resentment. If we could eradicate guilt and resentment from women's lives, it would free us up for so much.
I think that's a really useful insight. But perhaps we just need to say no to more stuff. Because I just remember when I first started saying no to things, because I used to say yes to everything, because I've got ADHD and I can do a lot of stuff simultaneously. And I started saying no, and nobody got upset with me. That was the interesting thing, was I had always assumed that people would be upset or disappointed if I said no, and they'd say, oh, okay, I'm not that important. I'm not important. That was my other realization.
Well, it's less about that, and it's it's not just about that, because I think we all probably kind of assume that if I say yes to everything, then I'm going to be more valuable, more liked, and more wanted in a team. When the other part of it, I think, is you also then recognize just if it's really important, whatever it is somebody's asking for you for helping on, they'll come back and tell you why and give you, more of a reasoning. But if they're just asking you because they're just seeing if you'll do it and what else they can get for free, I think you just also realize how many people are asking you for stuff that's frankly not valuable.
Well, the other problem too that I have because I'm a freelancer, is saying no to paid work, because there's always that fear in the back of your mind that, oh, this is the last job I'll ever get offered, this is the last work I'll ever get, so I can't say no to anything. And there's always the pressure of unpaid bills and all the living costs. So to say no to somebody offering me paid work plays into everything we just talked about, and then add on top of that the massive guilt of, oh my God, I just turned down money. So that becomes a real problem if it's all coming in at once, and I feel like often I have to say yes, or I have to say yes, I can do it now, instead of saying, well, that sounds like a really good project and I can take it on when I finish the current one in 3 weeks' time, or we can push the deadline back on this a little bit, or actually, no, I've got too much else on at the moment. And I also do need to sleep sometimes. So please come back to me next time, but I'll have to say no now. And on the few times I've done that, I've never had somebody say, oh, well, that's it, we're never coming to you again. Oh, you're done, you're dead to me. They just say, oh, that's a real shame. Can you recommend somebody who could do it? And as long as you recommend somebody good, they go, great, that was really useful, I'll come back next time, and they do. But it took me so long to be able to do that, because of the fear of running out of money, of never getting work again, of annoying people so much that they wouldn't ask me to work for them again. So that adds a whole different dimension to it as well.
Yeah, and I hear you, because I used to run my own business, and you just never said no to anything.
Yeah.
You really don't know when the next bit of work's coming.
Yeah, or even if you know when next month, maybe even the month after at the most, I can go maybe 3 months out, although that hasn't happened since before lockdown. But I mean, it's those people that will come back again and again, that you want to make sure they are happy with every single interaction.
Yeah, look after them. Hey, you mentioned that you like to stay at home and lock yourself away, but you've kind of had to do that. Aren't you in Melbourne?
Yes. Yeah, look, in many ways, I was lucky with Melbourne's lockdown, because I was already working from home. So I was used to that. Not that I actually had any work in 2020, but if I had, I was used to working from home, and my natural state when I'm under stress is to hide under a doona. But that's all fine when it's a choice. And when you get past that moment, the restorative thing is to then go back out into the world and greet all the people and, hello, here I am. And, you know, all your friends come out, cries of delight, you're back, let's have some fun. So I didn't have that balance to it, which I was used to. Now, I understand, as I said, I was very lucky that I managed to keep my house and somewhere to live the whole way through it. But yeah, it was a weird experience. It's almost impossible to explain what that was like. And it's, you know, it was getting to the point towards the end of the year where I wouldn't talk to my friends from interstate. Like somebody would ring me and I go, no, can't talk to me now. Wait till lockdown's over, because I do not want you to call me when you're standing in a queue at a restaurant about to go and have lunch with somebody. Go away. Yeah. Not there, you know. And it was just that day after day, and I would lose track of not just days, but of time. Like I'd wake up and it's 7 o'clock and I'd think, is it 7 in the morning or did I have a nap? Is it 7 at night? Do I have coffee or gin now? You know, what do I do? And just day after day after day after day of that, and that collective trauma of an entire city going through that for 9 months. We had that little 3-week break in the middle, but basically it was 9 months of that. And it's a thing that, you know, now that we're out again and you run into people and you can still see it in people, they're terrified of it happening again, or the isolation went on for so long that depression and paranoia and exhaustion set in ways that they still haven't recovered from.
Yeah. And, you know, I really feel for some of my team, you know, we had much shorter lockdowns in Melbourne, but, you know, they were really feeling the stress because they were in like studio apartments or 1-bedroom apartments, and, you know, were just not set up in a living space where they had a space to work as well. And they often had, you know, them and their partner trying to work in a studio apartment and stuff, which was, I think, really quite challenging.
Yeah, I mean, you just forget, you know, as I said, I've been working from home for 15 years now, but I forget how often I would do things like just go, I need to get out of the house. I'm going to go down to the local cafe or a library and just work there just for a change of scenery. And I just went, no, I work from home all the time. And I forgot how often I would actually do that. And all that just being trapped in your home, again, saying I was so lucky I've got this lovely little house and a tiny little backyard area where I can at least sit outside and get some air and natural light. But yes, I know what you were saying about friends living in 1-bedroom and studio apartments on their own in Melbourne for that whole time. It was so destructive.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. So I've just recently come back from the UK, where of course they're still pretty much in lockdown. Things are starting to ease now. I was there for 6 months, and I got there in September. We went into full national lockdown in November and didn't come out of it whilst I was still there for the whole time. And it was interesting because the lockdown there and I think the lockdowns here that I've experienced were very different. So yes, all the shops were shut. Everyone was still outside and going for, you know, an hour or a 2-hour walk, or in my case, 7 hours, because why else would you stay indoors? But it seemed like it was treated really differently. And I found that really interesting as well. I think Australia took it a lot more seriously. And perhaps part of it was down to, you know, in the UK, we'd started to roll out the vaccination program. So I think perhaps a few people just sort of went into that, we'll be okay, we're going to get vaccinated soon. And I don't know. But yeah, it felt very different to me, a lockdown here versus a lockdown in the UK.
Well, I guess the other thing too is that the lockdowns in Australia worked. I mean, I know, you know, dictator Dan is coming to get us all, but, you know, we didn't have the outbreaks in Australia that they've had almost everywhere else. We didn't, obviously there were, you know, hundreds of people who died, and that was horrible. And those people grieving for them will never get over it.
But it's in the hundreds, not the millions.
Yes, exactly. And it was, you know, what you were just saying, Annie, about the UK, the number of people there who died, who got sick, who were in hospital, you know, we didn't have that here. And that was mainly due to the lockdowns. You know, there were.
I've just looked at the stats whilst we've been chatting. 127,000 people died in the UK so far from COVID.
Wow.
That's just,
we're like 1,000 in Australia.
I think it's 910 last time.
Yeah.
It's not even 1,000 yet.
Yeah. That's pretty good. So, Jane, I wanted to talk, because I've known you since you ran King's Tribune, and I've long loved your FixedIt items. Can you tell us how you came to be doing them? Because I think that's worth talking about.
The FixedIt thing, like most things that I ended up becoming really passionate about, happened by accident. I've told this story so many times, so if anyone's listening and they've heard it before, I'll get through it pretty quickly. I'd been writing a lot about this topic. You know, I was writing, I think, for The Age at the time and for the Tribune, for a number of other places, and I was writing a lot about the way the media was reporting on men's violence against women and how terrible it was. And it just wasn't, I could see it wasn't getting any cut through. People really weren't getting it, why it mattered, what should be done differently. And I was on the tram one day, just scrolling through my phone, and some headline came up, Townsville police say selfie leads to stabbing murder. And I looked at it and thought, selfie caused a murder. Wow, I've taken some selfies. Does that mean I'm going to murder somebody or I'm going to be murdered? You know, obviously selfies do not cause murder. This is ridiculous. So instead of writing about it again, I had one of those apps on your phone that you use to, you know, make yourself look 10 kilos lighter and 10 years younger. So I just pulled that up, crossed out the headline, rewrote it, and threw it out to social media. And then I think just after that, my mum rang. So I was on the phone to mum on the tram and got home, you know, talked to the dogs, did a few things, and picked up my phone again. And when I turned it on, it just went in my hand. Like it just exploded. And I went, right, a picture quite literally is worth 1,000 words, because I was just writing 1,000-word articles and getting nowhere. And this one picture, which was, oh, sorry, that's me, which was about showing people what it could be if it was different, instead of telling people, was so effective. And so it started from there. I think at its height, I was probably doing 3 or 4 a day, which got too much. And again, going back to that thing that we were talking about before of saying no and getting overwhelmed and a bit of self-care. And I really had to pull it back. And then I was in this incredibly fortunate position. This doesn't happen to anyone, where publishers come to you and ask you to write a book.
Wow. I love that. So nice to hear.
Yeah, but it did. And so I wrote the FixedIt book, which I wrote in a month. I'd done obviously years of preparation for it, but I kept trying to write it, and I'd never written a book before, and I had no idea how to go about it. So, and I was, again, overwhelmed by kids and work and dogs and friends and life and everything. So a friend of mine's parents had a house at Phillip Island that they very generously let me have for a month. So I packed my dog, my coffee machine, a couple of pairs of clothes and my laptop into the car and went to Phillip Island. And I would get up at 6 o'clock every morning, go for a walk on the beach, come home, start work for 4 hours, have lunch, go for another walk, come home, have a nap, do a couple of hours editing, and then go to bed. And I did that every single day for 4 weeks and came home with 80,000 words in my bag.
Wow.
So what should have happened after that was a really serious couple of edits, and that didn't happen. But, you know, first book, and I didn't know what I was doing. I will know for the next one.
So on the point of the next one, or at least the next conversation related to this, and we spoke about this before we hit record. So the conversation, or the "are you kidding me" moment of the day is the latest campaign that's come out to try and educate teenagers about consent. Now, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, this video is a very, very complicated set of constructs that, frankly, I'm still trying to figure out what on earth they all mean. There's a bit about whether or not you move the line on pizza. There's a bit where a girl wipes some milkshake over a guy's face. There's a bit about, you know, touch my butt, don't touch my butt. It's like the weirdest thing I've seen in a very, very long time to try and get across something that's actually quite complicated as well. And it does a really bad job of it, in my opinion. But I wanted to ask you the question, what are your thoughts on this new video that the government's put out?
I should probably have checked before we started. What's your policy on swearing?
Oh, we fixed it.
Okay. I was asked to write about these consent videos for the New Daily, and when I got the email, I just looked at it and went, how do you say utter clusterfuck in 800 words? Because that is the only word I can think of to describe this. I mean, to be honest, it's the only word I can think of to describe a lot of what the Morrison government does. But This one, I think if you gave them a list of things not to do in consent education, and they mixed it up with the list of things you should do in consent education and did all the things you're not supposed to do. So that video you were talking about, Annie, there's with the milkshake one, there's the poor hapless white boy who's the victim of the mean girl's abuse.
Mm-hmm.
How you do consent education without talking about the fact that it is gendered, that it is overwhelmingly violence committed by men against women. Now, of course, there are exceptions, but when we're talking general education, you go with the majority, you know? And of course, you talk about the exceptions, but you don't base the entire concept of respectful relationships on girls being mean to boys and then expect boys to understand that they are anything other than victims. So that's one. There's if you're going to talk about consent and sex and rape, you should probably talk about sex and rape.
Yes.
But, I mean, I think that's like a basic something to start with. We're talking about stuff that's aimed at year 10, 11 and 12. These kids have heard of sex. Believe it or not, they have heard about it. A fair portion of them have done it. So not using the word sex in a video about sex is just bewildering.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not and then the whole suite of programs, they're not even talking about consent until they get to year 10. That just, again, my mind just, well, that should start in kindergarten.
Yeah, of course.
You know, that's
what there's that amazing video that the Thames Valley Police put out in like 2015 that talked about consent in terms of a cup of tea, which was super clear and really simple. Like they could have just re-recorded that.
Well, the other one I think that's done really well is one that the New Zealand government did, which was actually around helping parents to understand that particularly their young boys were more than likely watching porn whilst they were in their bedrooms or on their phone out and about.
Was that the one where the naked couple?
Yes, so this naked couple from the porn video come up and knock on the parents' door and go, hey, we just wanted to have a chat and let you know that your son's been watching a lot of porn, and we just want to make sure that he understands that consent is not really part of this, and we really want to make sure that your son gets it. And then the mother calls the son out and he gets so embarrassed. But it's funny, it's done in a really nice way, and the fact that it's two naked people standing at the front door trying to have this conversation, it's like, yeah, we get it's awkward, but it still needs to be done.
Yeah, and that was also facing the realities that teenage boys are looking at porn, and that a lot of the porn that is there free for them to look at is really dangerous stuff. Not all porn is dangerous, but the stuff that's free that teenage boys are looking at often is. And I mean, they start looking at this stuff at 11 or 12 when they've got no idea what they're even looking at. So if you're not having the conversations with them about this is what you're looking at as opposed to this is what sex is, what you're seeing on the screen as opposed to what a relationship is, even if that relationship only lasts for 3 hours, it is still a relationship in a hookup. Mm-hmm. It's a 3-hour relationship, or it can be a 30-year relationship and everything in between. But if you're not understanding it as a relationship between two, maybe more people, but they're people, if you're not understanding that, then you're not understanding the basics. And if those boys are seeing that at 11 or 12, and then 6 years later, some idiot comes along with a government-made video about milkshakes. I mean, I don't understand. You couldn't be anything but confused by this.
Well, I was confused. And like I said, I'm in my mid-40s. I was like, if you watch the video, they talk about moving the line. And I'm like, what was the line? We didn't speak about the line at all. And now there's a line and Pizza's just moved it. And I don't know why. Just the most bizarre, convoluted, confusing message for kids who are more than likely well aware of what sex is, as you say, Jane, well aware of the fact that they need to have some conversations around, well, do I want this? Do I not want this? And it just wasn't helpful.
It was so not helpful. I think the thing you're talking about with them moving the line, there's a couple of videos before that, so you need to watch them in sequence. And they
what the hell? You need to watch videos in sequence to get this message?
Yes. I mean, don't even get me started on this.
What?
Like I said, the list of things, do not do this. But anyway, so you need to watch them in sequence, and they'd set up this metaphor of something that I think is supposed to look like a sports field, which again, because while all the videos were made about girls being either the problem or the gatekeepers, obviously consent training is aimed at, in many ways, at boys. So, you know, you may not know this, ladies, but boys like sports, except for the boys who don't, but they're not proper boys, so we'll just ignore them. So we're going to go with the sports metaphor because that's how you engage the boys. They like sports and boobs, right? That's all they care about. Now, the fact is that teenage boys are as complex and as complicated and as varied as teenage girls. And they're not just all out looking for sex. So the bravado might make them think they need to appear that way. But you scratch that surface only a little bit, and underneath are all the same complications and fears and insecurities and desires for connection and relationships of all kinds that girls have. They're just so often told that they're not allowed to be that, but they all are that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the patriarchy is bad for men. We've talked about this at length. You know, that men are not allowed, and boys are taught that they're not allowed to be sensitive or anything like that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but, you know, boys, sports and boobs, that's all you're supposed to care about, you know, which is just bullshit because they care about so many more things. And I mean, that was one of the many things about these videos that I was just looking at it going, okay, I get the sports metaphor. I've even done sports metaphors in some of the training stuff that I've done, but you don't assume that that's the only thing that boys will connect to, you know, and it's just this. And, you know, consent training is also about teaching girls. It's about teaching everybody that the stuff we started off talking about is that it's okay to say no when you want to, and it's okay to not want to do things that you think you have to. So, you know, a lot of that stuff for the teenage boys is actually saying to them, you don't have to be chasing sex as a way to prove your manhood.
Yeah.
Can actually choose to find other ways to feel good about yourself and the way you are in the world and the people you interact with that is actually not about sex. And if we could change the world so that our boys could do that, they would be so much happier, girls would be so much safer, everybody would be so much better off. And it's really, I don't think, all that difficult. But perhaps I'm still as cynical as I like to think I am, perhaps I'm still too naive.
I think we underestimate all young people, not just, you know, young boys, but young girls as too. I think we underestimate them and we don't equip them well enough to have these conversations. So that's the thing that I got frustrated with, is similar to your point, Jane, that, you know, these kids know what sex is. They've either had it, they've seen it, they've watched films, they've watched porn, they've spoken about it in their friend groups. So for us to sort of diminish their intelligence by going, well, we're just going to talk about this in metaphor, it's just, it's unreasonable and it's unfair. And frankly, it's kind of rude.
It's condescending. It's really condescending. It's really fascinating because on TikTok, there's a whole lot of really interesting young men on there. And my TikTok experience is very different from many other people's. I just want to go on the record with that. But I'm seeing all these really interesting young cis hetero males coming on with nail polish and makeup saying, I'm still a man and I'm still a heterosexual male, but I like to wear makeup and I can't see anything wrong with it. And they really give me hope. I love seeing that they're confident in their own masculinity, but they're going, I just like how I look with makeup on and I don't see why I can't wear it. And here's my nice nail polish today.
Yeah, look, I think it's one of the things, again, that what you were saying, Annie, is we don't listen to young people. There's this, saying to somebody the other day, you get like half an hour, I think somewhere in your 20s, where you're not either too young to matter or too old to count, you know? But it's trying to understand that just because somebody's young and lacks experience doesn't mean they lack intelligence or ability or understanding or complexity or the ability to deal with all those complexities. Mm-hmm. The only thing they lack is experience and wrinkles, you know?
So what do you think about the notion of giving, say, 16-year-olds the vote?
I mean, if you could guarantee that all those 16-year-olds would be able to vote without interference from adults in their lives, I think it's a fabulous idea, because a lot of the decisions that are made by governments are really going to affect those 16-year-olds a lot more than they're going to affect somebody in their 80s. And I think 16-year-olds should have a say in environmental policy and education policy and taxation. The problem with it, the reason that we don't do it, is because we assume that people who are not technically adults can be more easily influenced, and I think that's definitely a factor. But
nobody who knows a 16-year-old and has tried to get them to do anything can think that. You have to have not met a 16-year-old to think like that, I reckon.
I think one of the other things that Jane's alluding to there as well is sort of, there's absolutely, they should have a voice. I think they should have the vote, but I think we should look at it similar to how perhaps we look at proportional representation of sort of geographies and the amount of people that sort of live in them, and in certain parts of the world that's a normal thing. Proportional representation is how you vote. Wouldn't it be interesting if we could do proportional representation of kids?
So 80-year-olds get less of a say than 16-year-olds.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know. I think another really interesting idea would be to have maybe a youth vote and a youth parliament. So you actually have people 16 to 18 voting for 16 to 18-year-olds who then become part of the parliament and have an actual say in the decisions that are made.
That's really good.
Oh, we could do something similar for Indigenous people too.
Hey, I've not heard of that before. Look, without going into that one in too much detail, like, it is one of those things where you look at it on paper or you look at it logically and you go, well, just give these people a voice, whoever these people are, whether it's an underrepresented minority, a group of kids, Indigenous peoples of Australia who have been here for 60,000 plus years and frankly should be given a voice anyway. It's all very obvious, but like everything in this world, and certainly here in Australia, moving to positions of equality for those who are in positions of power feels like, oppression.
Well, yes. I mean, if you've always had all the power, having any of that power taken away feels like oppression. But I also think, well, fuck them. It's time. It's well past time that the First Nations people of Australia had a say over their own lives and their own lands. I mean, that's not even something that we should be talking about anymore, let alone not happening. The fact that we haven't talked about putting young people into parliament, or all the other things that, God, the list goes on and on. All the other things that need to happen to actually have some measure of equality, of representation of the decisions that are made by governments that affect the entire nation, who have no say at all in those decisions.
Yeah.
We should be well and truly past that now. And it's like, you go to those women's marches last month and the people, again, still holding up signs saying, I can't believe we're still protesting this shit. And I look back at my mother's generation and even my grandmother's generation, and they were saying the same thing.
Perhaps, this is just a crazy idea that I've got, perhaps marching is not an effective way to make your opinion heard. And perhaps people need to do something different, like join a political party and try and influence their policy, because that's how decisions are made. So, that's why I don't go to marches. I literally do not go to marches because they don't matter. They're good on TV and that's it.
I'm not convinced they don't matter. I don't think they change a lot, but they can have an influence on the way we talk about things, which can eventually lead to change. So if you look at a lot of the huge social changes that have happened, and, it's not good enough yet, but we're not finished yet. Marches have been part of it
I'll give you that. Yes, that is a good point. But like the anti-Iraq war marches, they didn't stop the war, and we're still dealing with the ridiculous consequences of that war. To me, for Australia, what we need is war powers reform, so that the government can't just unilaterally decide to go to war without going through some sort of parliamentary process.
That's a fair one, Kate. Now I'm going to flip this from, sort of like we've had a good rant there for a good 25 minutes or so. So as kind of Kate's alluded to, we and you just said yourselves, we should be, further along, or it feels frustrating that we're not. What keeps you going? What gives you the inspiration and the hope to just keep getting back up and fighting the good fight?
You maybe asked me that at the wrong day. There are times when I think, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't, maybe it is a waste of time. And there are times when it's really hard to hold on to that. And I do just have to step away and feel like I've been doing this for so many years and nothing's changed. I guess usually the only way I get out of that is to remember that change requires the long view, that you can't just look at what happened yesterday or last week or last year. You've actually got to go back further than that. And when you do, there's real cause to hope. When you look at 50 years ago, I was just writing this for a book that's coming out in June. If you look at my mother and me and my daughter, when my mother started work, rape and marriage was not criminal, but abortion was. So was homosexuality. We had no right to equal pay. We had no right to protection from sexual harassment at work. And, you know, it took so many, well, mostly women. It wasn't like a whole lot of benevolent men came along and went, here you go, darlings, have all these things that we've prepared for you. We had to fight for them. We had to fight hard. We had to suffer for it. But we did. And, you know, we did change an enormous amount of things. And we did it in, you know, human history terms in a relatively short period of time. And I think if you look 50 years ahead, I don't think things will be as they are now. I don't think my daughter will be sitting there looking at her daughter or her son and thinking their life is the same as my mother's was. Things will keep changing, and it is that long view when I have to step back and take a breath and think, okay, why do I get up tomorrow and do this again? It's that long view and knowing that all those women that fought for that change fought relentlessly. And there was a lot of collaborative work too, that if somebody had to step down for a minute, you know, they'd pass the baton on and somebody else would pick it up and keep running. And there were a lot of people running. They were running in a lot of different directions too. They were not always running together. They were not always agreeing with each other. In fact, they quite fiercely disagreed with each other in many ways. They failed in a lot of ways. We absolutely failed the First Nations women for the last 50 years in feminism. But that doesn't mean that we have failed. It means we just haven't finished yet. And it means that all the women who are doing that work now, all the women of tomorrow and next year and 50 years from now who will still be doing that work will be building on the achievements that have already been made. That's the thing I tell myself to get up and keep going.
That is a very good thing to tell yourself, because I believe it's true.
Yes, right.
And that seems like a really good place to draw this to a close. Thank you so much, Jane. Lovely to finally catch up with you. Nice to see you again, Annie. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for having me, guys. It's been really fun.
Thanks, Jane.